Alright, so I know that the last video might have made it look like The Lost Age was coming next, and don't worry, I haven't forgotten about it. It's just that Dragon Quest wasn't content with 4 consecutive videos earlier, and decided to hijack the spotlight again. And given that this one is my most popular video by a considerable margin, it really is about time I followed up on it. I mean, it's only been about, what, a year and a half now? Good enough. There's always a bit of mystique when it comes to us outsiders trying to make sense of the sheer Dragon Quest mania that runs rampant in Japan, with plenty of stories that blur the line between fact and urban legend. Most famously, the rumor that the series was legally ordered to only release new games on weekends because everyone kept skipping work and school to play them. While that rumor is largely exaggerated, one that I wish was, but probably wasn't, was that when Dragon Quest IV hit the Famicom in 1990, demand was getting so ridiculous that a lot of people got mugged over their copies of the game. Definitely not something you want on a game's legacy, but it speaks volumes for just how much of a cultural phenomenon those games were becoming over there. Obviously, the game didn't get a fraction of that attention over here in the West when it hit the NES as Dragon Warrior 4 in 1992, but at least it was the last time they looked at Toriyama's iconic artwork and decided to do this to it. I've never played the original, but the story behind its remakes is a little interesting. The game got a PlayStation remake, which never officially made it over here. Stop repeating yourself, history. No harm done though, because we got the DS version, which is basically the same thing, and a mobile port, which is basically the same thing as that. And unlike the mobile version of Dragon Quest III, which came with some cut corners, you're getting the full experience with this one. In fact, it's actually better, but we'll get to that. Dragon Quest IV marks a bit of an upheaval in the series' status quo. The Trilogy was done and dusted, with this game heralding the advent of the Zenithian Trilogy, bringing with it an entirely new plot and world. The 4th entry in both of these two series are similar in that they're the first ones where the playable roster is actually filled with characters worth caring about, unlike the second games that sort of had characters, but not really. Dragon Quest IV still has the usual silent protagonist, often referred to as Solo or Sophia depending on which gender you pick, and if you like having that option, then savor it, because it didn't come back for about 2 decades. But all you get with this guy or gal at first is a brief prologue which swiftly segues into the feature that was so important that the English remake got named after it. The game is split into various chapters, with one or several characters taking the lead, a system that brings with it various improvements and restrictions. Each of the characters have their own names, personalities, backstories, motivations, and, crucially, their own battle capabilities. The class-changing system from the 3rd game is gone now, and each character has their own role, like healer, warrior, mage, and the best one. In stark contrast to the Trilogy, which gave you your objective and then kicked you out into a mostly open world to start going about that, this game's chapter system restricts you to a much more linear pathway, but with a major upgrade, that being the story. Rather than having your end goal laid right out at the start like before, this game's story flows a lot more organically as, in the course of their individual adventures, the characters catch glimpses of the greater threat creeping into the world, and come to the conclusion that, yeah, they should probably find this chosen hero person and help him save the day. And when you finally get to play as the hero, it feels like an event, with the story kicking into high gear in a very big way as you begin the final chapter that's bigger than all the other chapters combined. You can explore properly too, with the world opening up considerably as you meet the other characters, add them to your world-saving brigade, and adventure to the ends of the earth, and even to the heavenly realm of Zenithia that is the trilogy's namesake. All the plot hooks in the previous chapters get their resolutions, which all weave together into a plot that's honestly really impressive for a game of its time. And this narrative was helped immensely in the remake by the reintroduction of a feature that made its debut in Dragon Quest VII, Party Chat. Pretty much anywhere in the game that isn't a battle, you can get your party members to voice their thoughts and opinions on, well, practically anything. Use this every time you travel somewhere new, or when something important happens. I love when RPGs just give the characters a chance to talk. Doesn't even have to be anything plot related, just let them chat. It can go so far towards making them feel alive. And Dragon Quest does this super well. A lot better than I initially realized, actually. If you use the party chat after talking with practically any NPC in the game, your characters might react to what they say. It had to have been a huge amount of work to put this much extra dialogue into this game and the other two Zenithian remakes, but the games are so much better for it. And apparently, Dragon Quest's localizers thought that it would have been a huge amount of work too, because now we get to the main improvement that the mobile version of the game has over the DS one. The DS one doesn't have party chat at all. The other remakes do, but not this one, which is a shame since of the three, Dragon Quest IV is probably the one that needed it the most. This is still a remake of an NES game at the end of the day, so everything is still fairly simplistic. The characters didn't really talk that much originally, which made the addition of the party chat that much bigger. It's not often that you say that the mobile version of a game is the definitive version, but aside from button controls and a nicer UI, the DS version doesn't really have anything over this one. But before I move away from the dialogue, I should probably bring up a potential issue with it: the accents. Dragon Quest's English localizations use a lot of them, usually British ones, in the speech patterns of the various characters. I know I harped on about the Old English in Dragon Quest I, a lot more than I would now if I'm being honest, but the accents in the broader series are a different story for me. They always walk the line between charming and cheesy, but 9 times out of 10 I'm completely on board with them, and don't even want to think of a world where Yangus wasn't bestowed his glorious Cockney accent.
God blimey, don't sneak up on me like that!
That said, the accents are laid on a bit thicker in 4 than in other games in this series. Take Ragnar, for example, whose Scottish accent is so impenetrable that it's genuinely hard to read, as opposed to Rab's far more palatable Scottish accent in Dragon Quest XI. Personally, I'm still okay with it. I grew up on Redwall, I can make my way through a thick accent or two, but I can see how this could be a turnoff for some people. Anyway, back to the rest of the game. For all the good work that the chapter system did for the game's story, I have one particular problem with it as far as gameplay is concerned. With every change in the playable cast, you're sent straight back to level 1. It can really take the wind out of your sails when you've been battling and building up some solid momentum only to have it swept out from under you as you're forced to shift the focus to a bunch of newbies again. I get that this is so they're all around the same level when they join up with the main hero, but come on! If Ragnar can get a massive experience boost out of nowhere, then I don't think it would have been too out of place to just make the characters in later chapters higher level, then sneakily hand the weaker characters some level ups behind the scenes. And since I'm on the topic of poor pacing, Tornico's chapter slows to an absolute crawl at the end. Pity, it was pretty fun before that. But at least throughout these slower sections of the game, the presentation is fantastic. The environments are done with a mixture of 3D objects and 2D sprites that works really well, but the battles are where it really starts to look good, with some stunningly crisp and smooth sprite work, which is a real breath of fresh air after 3 games of fighting static images. The entire trilogy of Zenithian remakes got this treatment, and it's great. I won't lie, I kind of wish Dragon Quest could have ditched the first-person perspective on these fights earlier than the 8th game. I get that it's iconic and all, but I really would have liked to see a Dragon Quest pixel game where you can actually see the party members fight. But be that as it may, this is, in my opinion, by far the best take on the classic style. For now, at least. The core battle gameplay hasn't changed a whole lot this time, other than the removal of class changes. You can swap party members in and out of the fight mid-battle sometimes, but aside from that, it's mostly the usual stuff. some new spells, new equipment, and a new type of metal slime to be angry at. Come back, you cowards! However, there is a new way to engage in these fights. Dragon Quest IV was the first game to strike upon the golden solution to the ever-present threat of RPG grinding, which is having the game do it for you in AI-driven auto battles, or, as Dragon Quest calls it, the tactics menu. For some reason, I've always balked at the idea of letting a computer take command of my RPG battles, but if you ever start to get tired of the repeated fights in a Dragon Quest game, learn from my mistake and use this thing. The AI is extremely competent, and you can give each character simple tactics to follow if you want a bit more control. It saves so much hassle on any fight you'd rather just get over with quickly. Use it. It works. Well, more accurately, it works in this version. Apparently, the tactics system was a bit rougher in the original, with future iterations ironing the kinks out. But it was still quite an accomplishment back in the day. So much so, in fact, that they outright forced you to use it, which sounds awful, really. The game has some really difficult boss fights, which are the one time you consistently don't want to use auto-battling, because even if the AI works, and it apparently didn't always back then, how are you supposed to mount a coordinated assault when the characters won't listen to you, and attack spells still have a chance to whiff? Ugh, really? You couldn't have fixed that in the remake? Well, the tactics system works just fine in this version, so no harm done. The game added some other things too, like mini-medals, saving the game at churches, and an outlet for its designer's infamous gambling addiction, but let's cut to the chase and get to the ending, and with it my greatest frustration with Dragon Quest IV's remake. No, they didn't bring back the cave to Renderak, they did something else. You might notice that I've been a bit quiet about the actual contents of this game's plot, and that's because in order to properly explain what's eating at me here, I have to delve into some major spoilers. So if you don't want that, here's where to skip to, and if you're still here, buckle up. At the core of the game's central conflict lies an ill-fated romance between an elf named Rose and the game's main antagonist, Sorrow the Manslayer. Sorrow is Dragon Quest's first attempt at a tragic villain, and one that they pulled off impressively well. Deadly as he is, he's clearly shown to have a sense of honor, with his hatred of humanity fueled by the horrible treatment Rose suffered at the hands of certain humans. His quest for vengeance goes much too far, indeed a lot farther than Rose ever wanted, and ultimately results in tragedy not only for the world at large, but the star-crossed couple themselves. Near the journey's conclusion, one of Sorrow's underlings hatches a scheme for power that sees Rose killed by human mercenaries, and plunges Sorrow so far into madness that he claims a cursed power and undergoes a monstrous transformation to enact his revenge. It's the first time in a Dragon Quest game in which taking down the main villain doesn't feel like an unequivocal triumph. Sorrow was already a proven menace before this, and it was a fight that had to happen if peace was ever to be restored, but given everything you learned about him, it's still a victory with a bitter aftertaste. And here's how the remake ruins it. After beating the game for the first time, you unlock an extra chapter and an alternate ending in which you find a magical flower, throw it onto Rose's grave, and revive her from the dead. She then tearfully tells Sorrow to stop fighting, and his big evil monster form goes poof, along with nearly all of the investment I had in this story. Are you serious? This is like if Shakespeare did a rewrite of Romeo and Juliet, except Romeo gets brought back to life by a bolt of lightning just in time to stop Juliet from killing herself. Like, I'm happy for you two, I guess. But Rose's death and Sorrow's subsequent transformation were what all of the game's mystery, foreshadowing, and plot twists were building up towards. Get back in! And it's not like the game gives much of anything in return for this either. Sorrow joins your team, you fight the traitor from before who's stolen the evil transformation powers, and that's it, really. Alright. To be fair, the extra chapter does make some nice contributions on the gameplay side of things. New places to explore, new battles to fight, and as little as I like how they turned Sorrow from a tragic villain to a grumpy anti-hero in the space of a minute, he is loads of fun to play as. Also, the story alterations admittedly aren't nearly as aggravating as they could have been, because this isn't a replacement for the old ending. It's an optional alternate ending, but it still rubs me the wrong way something fierce. Alright, so as it turned out, this wasn't even the first time a Dragon Quest remake did something like this. The remake of Dragon Quest III let you literally Shenron someone back to life if you wanted. Great. Well, botched endings notwithstanding, Dragon Quest IV stood as proof of the series' versatility and staying power, kicking off a brand new saga that would stretch well into the next generation of consoles. And before you ask, yes, I do intend to review them. Maybe not all in a row, but they will be done. Which is good, because the next game is really something special.